I mean, the sort of conflict that folks have focused most on, let me put it that way, since November is the one between the federal government in Addis Ababa and what had been the sort of governing authorities in Tigray, the northern state of one of the northern states of Ethiopia. And it wasn't so much a religious conflict as one animated by a contestation over sort of authority, because the governing elites, as you probably know, and at that time in Tigray, had been the sort of dominant faction within the ruling party that had governed the entire country. The challenge is that sort of rather kind of simplistic way of looking at it, as I just explained it, obscures what I think is a much more profound national political crisis that Ethiopia is facing, and a crisis of authority and a crisis in confidence in the federal system that had basically been the governing model since the end of the communist regime, or since the communist regime was overthrown in the 1990s. When Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed came to power, to much accolades, there were, of course, a lot of reforms, the release of political prisoners, etc. And there was a lot of discussion about changing the governing model of Ethiopia, but no consensus really built on what would replace the federal system. And that has more or less led to sort of the opening up of the Pandora's box, a symptom of which, albeit a very significant and lethal one, has been the eruption of conflict in Tigray. But there are in some ways equally significant conflicts in other parts of the country. So Oromo, which is the states, they're ethnic states in Ethiopia. And so 60% of Ethiopians are Oromo, and their ethnic state has also had a fairly significant insurgency ongoing for some months now. There's grave instability in Benishangul Gumuz, which is where the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam that the Egyptians are so concerned about is located. There's a number of other unstable pockets. And even prior to the outbreak of the war in November, in 2018, 2019, there were more internally displaced people in Ethiopia than any other country in the continent of Africa, primarily through political violence. And so that's a pretty strong indicator of instability, even as, Karen rightly points out, you had the spike of investment representative to some extent, I think, although not entirely, from the sort of accolades poured on Prime Minister Abiy for some of his reforms and for his outreach to Eritrea. But now we're really entering a very concerning period. And, this is a country of 110 million people. I think it is not certainly at this point alarmist to say that it may be heading towards collapse. And I have to say, I mean, that it would be, as we point out actually in the report, the largest state collapse in modern history. I mean, it's 5 times the number of people that lived in pre-war Syria. So, I mean, it's the regional political and security implications, never mind, of course, the humanitarian catastrophe that would unleash.